You're listening to My Inner Teacher with Peter Starius and Crystal Ariel. The answers you seek are within you.
Laura, I'm trying to remember, have we met in person?
You know, Peter, I'm not sure if we've met in person, but as I was saying, Crystal was, she informed me that you live in Sloan and that, yeah. And then I met, Blake, who was a part of Mind Body many years ago, actually in 2007. And, this was before Mind Body became Mind Body.
Right.
And yeah, I was sitting next to him at a yoga journal conference. There was a big dinner, presenters dinner, and I was sitting next to him. And this kind of goes like with the whole idea of like following your inner voice and not listening to outside voices, because he was telling me about this new online way of signing people or software, sign people into classes. And, you know, back then, as you said, punch cards, signing people in with paper and pencil, like that was the way. And I was like, yeah, like that's going to take off or whatever. And obviously it did. So it's very much about like listening to your inner voice, your compass, rather, and instead of like getting, not that I told him that, rather than like getting like the opinions like of other people. And it's like, I think if you do create something, it's finding people who are going to support you and be like, oh yeah, that's, you know, and lift you up. Definitely.
Yeah, that's a delicate balance, you know, when these, what do you call them, thought leaders, they're 5 years ahead of their time and they're coming up with these ideas that just seem impossible.
Totally.
And yet, you know, the thing that I've learned in business anyway is the successful companies are the companies that have the stamina to stay in the game as long as there's soul involved in the company, in the heart space of the company. You love what you're doing. You couldn't see yourself doing anything else in that moment, and you just stick with it. So,
Yeah.
and I think they just, you know, 5 years ago sold for $7 billion.
Wow.
Isn't
Yeah.
that wild?
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's wild. That's amazing. Yeah. Yeah. So I like how it started like in like a garage. She was something, oh, I'm just going to create something in my garage, to this thing, you know, this beautiful, you know, business that, yeah, sold for that amount of money. That's
Manduka's the same story. This space that I'm in right now was my garage, and this studio now where I work is where Manduka got its start. And
oh, that's amazing.
it is
That's
kind of
amazing.
amazing full circle. Yeah.
I love that. When did Manduka start?
1997.
Okay. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool.
Been around a long
around.
time.
Been around. And were you teaching at that time, or were you like, we just need to have these durable mats rather than those like whatever, those like really flat purple?
They
blue-
weren't even purple. The early mats were pastel green.
Yes, nice.
And they kind of flaked, the little beads of PVC flaked all over the studio floor. And you
Yes.
had to dust mop every night just to get the little flakes of yoga mat off the floor. Yeah, no, I was teaching. I had a studio and I had a teacher that was coming along once a year, usually from Australia, on his way from Europe back to Australia. And he'd stop in San Luis Obispo and teach. And one year he showed up with this thick black mat. Not that it wasn't exactly like the current version of it, but it was thick and black. And that was like revolutionary, just the thickness, the weight, and the color. And first time I tried it, it was like, I got to have one of these. And that's how the story began. Basically, within a couple days, Andor's friend in Germany, where he was coming from, worked with a guy who worked in the factory, and he hooked us up. And I made my first order like a couple weeks after that.
Nice.
And that's how the company got started.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. 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 You get a little inspiration. You found a need. Someone brought something in. You're like, okay, this is good. We should create more of these.
That was basically it. And then as the word of mouth, and back in the day, the internet was called word of mouth, you know, and word of mouth just kind of, I didn't have a sales force for the first 5 years. It just was people that I met told the people that they knew, and it went viral before even the word viral was viral. And yeah, it was just a company based on the love of yoga. And it also attracted the type of people that wanted to share that. I had great employees in those early days. They just wanted to catch a wave of the bob, so to speak.
Yeah.
You know that word, bob?
The weight of the bob?
No, ride the wake of the bob. Do you know what bob is?
Riding the wake of the bob. It
The
sounds very
wave, the wave of the bob.
the wave of the bob.
Yeah.
Does it have to do with surfing?
I skipped
No,
it.
the bob is a Sanskrit term that is used in kirtan and kind of devotional yoga. And I didn't know it because that isn't the type of yoga that I practice. But that kind of expression was perfect, that this flow happens naturally.
Yeah.
And Manduka was a company that just flowed in the beginning. It wasn't that much work. I could tell that story for hours, but what I'd love to talk about is your story. Yes. And
No, but I love hearing these stories. I love hearing these stories because they're very inspirational, and it's kind of like goes along with yeah, like following your heart, and even though I'm sure there were like, yes, you might have hard times or things come up, but it's like really doing like what's in your heart or where you see that path like going. So
what was your first introduction to yoga?
my first introduction to yoga was actually I was in high school, and I needed a way to de-stress, and I was really into like health and wellness already. I danced, and I would go to the gym, and I would do all these things, and so I loved reading like health and wellness magazines, and so I don't think I didn't even drive them. I think I was like 15, and I asked my mom to take me to this yoga class, and she dropped me off, and I walked in, and it was like all these like it was like not even a lot. It was just women who were like in their like 80s, 70s or 80s, and they just laid there in the dark, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I mean, like, what are we doing? Like, that was it, and I was like, huh. Okay. All right. It's a little different than what I was anticipating. And then later on, when I was in college, there was this studio. There were a couple studios in Lexington. That's where from Kentucky originally. So there was a studio that had more like hatha yoga, and then there was another one that had Bikram. And so definitely more toward the end of college, I gravitated toward yoga because of just, again, stress, ways of dealing with stress. I was having like certain health issues just from stress and not sleeping. And the methods that I was using to de-stress, they were like the healthiest ways, as far as like going out is fine, but maybe substances and beverages. I had a great time, but maybe it wasn't the best thing for my body. So it's like, okay, let me try yoga again. Like, let me go to yoga class. And then I really liked it. I was like, we weren't just laying there. And I really liked the connection of the breath, the movement. It reminded me of like this movement meditative quality that I had when I used to dance. And so that's where I really got into that and taught me how to breathe. And you can breathe in stressful situations. Yeah. And it helped me become more aware of the neck down as with dancing, even you have body awareness. A lot of times you ignore sometimes the neck down when it comes to like pain. You push through it. And instead with yoga, it's like, oh, this doesn't feel good. Oh, well, then maybe not do it. Or maybe I back off, or maybe it's just like, it was more of that like body awareness, which I really liked.
Fantastic. That is one of the mentalities, let's say, of moving from some pastime like dance into a yoga world, because you would think dancers and yogis have so many things in common: flexibility, strength, body awareness, but then the extremes of anything, the extremes of yoga, the extremes of dance, put you into a territory of, vulnerability, let's call it. Did you experience that vulnerability at some point obviously with dance, right? At some point, and then even in yoga, where you maybe felt that whoever you were learning from or technique that you were using wasn't necessarily serving you?
Oh, yes. Yes, definitely. I mean, I think that definitely some in dance, but I think even more so later on in yoga, where some of I remember being in a class, and I was actually in teacher training, and the teacher was having us put her hands at prayer behind the heart, and she took my hands and she like lifted it up and put my hands together, and it hurt my shoulders and my wrists for like weeks after that.
Right.
And so I think it's a lot of times there's this ideal, and instead of saying, well, all of our bodies are different, ideal that you're trying to not shove someone in, but put someone in, place someone in, and that one size fits all doesn't work, because we're all uniquely and wonderfully made. And so I think things like that, and also just repetitive stress, doing the same thing over and over again. I mean, even if it's a good thing, if you do something, I think, repetitively, be it your shoulders, chaturanga, it can be like, there's certain things I think can be like hard. So I know, like for me, I haven't done chaturanga the longest time because my shoulders, like we had enough of that a long time ago, So there are certain things that, even with, my hips, this and that, like even as a teacher, even though I didn't demonstrate, I would do my own practice, and I go and practice over here, and just constantly doing the same thing. And also I was, a lot more flexible, and being like, and it was more like, it was more of a curiosity. Where can I take my leg? Well, can I take it over here? Well, what if I did this? And maybe your leg doesn't really, like, I don't need to have my leg right here. I don't know, maybe. And so I think that there are things that, I think some of that either the ideals and the pushing, or the ideals, or whatever else. I know for myself, and I think some other people have also experienced from jibber jabbering with them. It can, it's not always the maybe kindest on the body. Yeah,
That's a powerful word, kind. Like you don't hear that word much in yoga, or at least in the old days, you didn't hear that kindness word much.
Correct. Yeah, you can pick out. Yeah, and I think that's kind of going away from what something should look like.
Right.
Rather than, okay, this is the basic framework, but how does that actually look on different bodies?
Right.
And I think and then also, where was this posture? Where did it come from? And why is the alignment like this? And does that alignment over time, is it beneficial? In many cases, it's fine. And sometimes, after people seeing PTs and orthopedic surgeons and whatever else, maybe it needs to be updated a little bit. Software update, and that doesn't mean the yoga practice or anything like that is hard. It's like if you running is amazing, but like, okay, well, what's the best thing I can do for my knees? Skiing is great, but again, knees, it's soccer, knees, hips, so I think yoga's the same thing. We're moving. So it's the same thing. It's like, okay, what actually, for someone's particular body, what makes sense? And then overall, are there like software updates that need to be, implied in order to make it better?
So I'm so glad you chose that word, software update.
Yeah.
Like software. And especially the soft part, because my experience, I broke my back 20 years ago. And when I broke my back, all the technique up to that point to heal with yoga, it wasn't working. Through trial and error, more than anything, breath and creating softness in my body is what allowed me to move and heal and gradually build my strength back up. And that's the paradox with softness.
Yeah.
It actually, as you learn how to surrender into gravity, my book, Gravity and Grace, I talk a lot about how softening allows gravity to influence movement. And then with your intuitive part of your brain, can you respond to that movement without any kind of technique other than your response intuitively to gravity pulling you down? And the science behind it is, as gravity pulls you down, there's an equal and opposite force up. Can you catch that? Can you feel into your alignment that's intuitive instead of imposed? And can that intuitive alignment create the lightness you seek? And the answer for me was, with a broken back, yes, freedom from pain.
Hey, quick note. Peter's Inner Teacher Academy is launching soon. If this is resonating with you, head over to innerteacheracademy.com and grab a spot on the wait list. These trainings are intimate and space is limited. So if you want to be first in line, tap the link in the description below and sign up.
You can also see details about my 2025 retreats at some incredible locations around the world, like Iceland, Austria, California, and New Zealand. Attendance at these trainings will count towards in-person hours for the Inner Teacher Academy. And now let's get back to the magic. Have you had like similar setbacks, injuries or things that have happened to you that have informed the yoga that you're doing now or teaching now?
Yeah, oh, definitely. Well, even with kind of like what you're expressing, I've had to see a lot of physical therapists over the past 9 years, quite a few. And I know that for myself, especially in more recent years, if a physical therapist is like, they assume that you're a yoga teacher, like, oh, you can do all these things, and you're like, no, like little, go with the micro, not this macro movements, and kind of like what you're saying. I know that for myself, kind of like with you with your back and breaking your back injury, it's almost like it's like testing the water with certain things, like very slowly doing things. And I've heard that sometimes when you do push, that if you test the water, it's like you're like, okay, how does this feel? And one of the things I love when I was talking with Andy Carpenter a year or so ago, it's doing 80%. It's like finding this and like backing off. Like, what is this? And I think part of it, one, is so you don't overdo things. But two, it's, I think when you just do like this first little step, then it signals to your brain like, oh, this is okay. This is safe. Okay. Well, then is this safe? Like, how does this feel? Like, instead of just going full throttle into something, it's like, it's taking like these micro steps and being okay with that. Even if someone else or what the ideal is, it's doing that. So I feel like, yes, I've had like a lot of my own injuries. Like, I've had surgery on my hip. I've had issues with my other hip. I don't do any chaturangas. I haven't had any surgeries, but I did like a lot of PT, for my shoulders. And so in my own practice now, it is very simple. It's very like this. It's not grandiose. It's like this. Yeah. Yeah. And it's being okay with that.
Hey, yeah. That's huge.
I remember when I was taking your training, and what is it? Kapotasana? The one where you're like,
yes. When you're in, yes.
You're basically contortioning. And you were like, oh, yeah, does anybody want to try? And I was like, yeah, I can do this, because I had done it in the past. So I get into it. And then after working with you and being able to shift my perspective on how to approach this, it's like, okay, yeah, I could get into that, but it doesn't actually feel good. So why do I want to do this? Just so that I can prove that I can make a shape with my body that doesn't actually feel good to me.
Right.
And that was huge.
That makes a lot of sense. And I can relate. When I was doing more mobile things, postures, one of the things I was really trying to get into was coming into dancer's pose, and holding onto my foot back here, or coming into king pigeon pose. And I could do it, but afterwards I'm like, oh, my back doesn't feel great. So it's like, why force? Or even if it's not something extravagant, even like if you're like going into side angle pose and the bound variation of that, does that feel good on your body? Or does it actually feel, it's fine if it does, or does it feel more like liberating and open to not do that and have the arm overhead? Like, what feels best to your body, your anatomy, rather than trying to push into something?
I have a question. What was your biggest influence when you first got serious about yoga? Was it a style of yoga, a teacher of yoga? Was it something that, what motivated you to practice the way you do in that moment?
To practice the way I do now, or to
No, go back.
Go back.
Yeah, go back to where you said, you got serious in college, a little more serious about yoga.
Yeah.
What, in this day and age, I call it convenient yoga. Mm-hmm. People tend to go to yoga classes that fit their schedule, or fit their budget, or fit proximity. Like if the yoga studio is 2 blocks away versus across town.
Right.
The crosstown teacher might be a better teacher, but the studio, I can get all these things done and then 5 minutes before class, show up at class and get a workout.
Right. Was
there something that was motivating you in those days when you got serious? What was that was making that commitment based on?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things. One was trying to find a better way to de-stress.
Right.
When and then I was very much of like overachiever when it comes to like schoolwork and, work outside of school and this and that. So I think it was that finding a healthier way to manage some of those things and those expectations. But also my brother worked at the Toyota, like the actual, not the plant, but the office.
Corporate headquarters.
Yeah, they do office things there. Yes, the headquarters. And he was doing computer programming and all that stuff. And there was a woman who he worked with. And I was going to New York because with the honor society to go to New York to some thing about journalism or whatever it was, And so I went up there. My brother was like, "Oh, you should stop by Jiva Mukti because because her sister does PR work for them. I know you're kind of into yoga a little bit and your major is in communications and PR work. So why didn't you meet with her?" And so I did. And I was like, "Oh, well, this would be kind of cool, to maybe do an internship with her." And so I went back and I was like, wow, I really need to learn more about this yoga stuff. So I got the Jiva Mukti book. And then I was like, I'm going to be going to Bikram classes, which I didn't realize it's quite different at that time. And so, and so I really wanted this internship at Jiva Mukti. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to believe. I'm going to have faith. I'm going to get this thing. And, so I packed up my car. I didn't have a job, but I found a place that was only for 3 months. And I was like, okay, I'm just going. I'm going to go up there. And so when I got there, she wasn't even there anymore. And I was like, and they still had this internship position open. And I interviewed for it. And the only reason why I was hired is because the person who I was working with was a University of Kentucky basketball fan. And I was like, all right, there we go. But it was funny because I looked at the stack of resumes and these people were so much more qualified than me. Yeah. So so when I was doing this job, which was an internship that turned into a job, I was in a broom closet pretty much that turned into an office. And I would just sit there and type for 10 hours a day. And I would look out and I'm like, kind of like what those teachers are doing better than what I'm doing. I'm not really into this as much, but I really like that. And I was starting to do more of the practice. Really enjoyed the practice. And I really enjoyed how moving into more of a healthier lifestyle than what I was living. And I really liked taking some of those concepts literally off the mat and into the world, but off the mat into the office. So I'm like, oh, I'm in a stressful situation. How can I just breathe instead of holding my breath? Different things like that. Yeah.
Fantastic. So would you say those early days of yoga, you found a yoga, Jiva Mukti yoga, was checking the boxes of what you were looking for?
It was checking the boxes of what I was looking for. It was. It was a little game changer going from Bikram to Jiva Mukti. Because in Bikram, I was like, I'm going to be in the front row. I'm going to do all this stuff and whatever else. And I did the same thing at Jiva Mukti. And then they're like, Irbhadrasana 1. I'm like, what are we doing? Oh, okay. I guess I stepped back and I put my arms in the air. And it was such a transition because there aren't this. You don't have Warrior 1, Warrior 2. That's not in the whole Bikram collection.
That's right.
Yeah. But it did check off some of those boxes. at that time. But then I was introduced to even more, there would be guest teachers who came in, but I was introduced to even more, I think, styles when I moved from New York to San Francisco.
Yeah.
Yeah.
San Francisco in those days, I think, would you say this is 90s-ish?
When I was at Jivamukti, that was 2003, 2004,
Okay.
and I came out to San Francisco more toward 2006.
Yeah, San Francisco in those days was one of the meccas, it seems like so many top teachers were living in the Bay Area. What were you drawn towards?
I was drawn toward coming to San Francisco. Well, one, my internship had ended. And I think a lot of things had ended because they were like focused on creating these DVDs. No, was it DVDs at the time? Yes, DVDs. And so they're really focused on that. Anyway, that ended, and I went to India, not for yoga reasons, but to do volunteer work. And when I came back after being there for 4 months, I was very sick. And I was sick and tired of being sick and tired for a year and a half and being in and out of the hospital. I was like, this is like, I got to change this up a little bit. So I went to a yoga journal conference in January of 2006 in San Francisco. I was in there, and the first booth was the San Francisco Bay Club, and I was talking to this woman, and I was like, kind of feel like I'm going to do your job, not like I'm going to take her job. And she was doing like the PR work. She was doing marketing for them. And then I saw this picture of this guy. I didn't even know who he was. It was Jason Crandall. And I was like, I just have this feeling I'm going to work with that guy. And so instead of getting on the plane, I stayed, and I ended up working there more in the spa area. And within a couple of months, she was leaving, and I applied for the job. And I was doing like the marketing and stuff for them. And Jason was my boss at that time. Wow. He was the yoga director. Yeah.
Fantastic. So that's a pretty powerful lineage to align with, Jason Crandall's lineage.
Yes. So he and I started working together in 2006. He was actually definitely was and still is. I was my main teacher. And so, we worked a lot together then and then in other capacities later on.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
So you have this now kind of root in a long lineage of, Jason's lineage is similar to my lineage. Mm-hmm. And then at some point, it sounds like you've kind of developed something that is your own. Like
definitely.
And how did that come about? What was it that motivated you to say, I think my unique situation can take this to another level? Yeah.
I think, there's a lot of, it's a lot of different things. But
we have time here. This is
exactly. Yeah. Well, I think one of the things is, I was working with Jason. He did not offer like 200-hour trainings at that time. And so my first training was more they're all Iyengar teachers. It was not an Iyengar training, but all Iyengar teachers. And I'm like, after the training, it was good. I get to know like what to do with your nasal hair and like Trikonasana and like, what to do, where that should be placed and all that stuff. Yeah.
Can you break down the nasal hair for a second?
That's a joke. Crystal, in case you didn't realize it. See, I think I have met you because that sense of humor I remember from something.
From somewhere.
Really good.
Oh, yeah. We were like 3 hours just on that. I'm like, okay, we hopefully we got it. And so, and then after having that training, I had started, and Jason taught one day or one section of that training. And I said, okay, so I did that. After that training, I'm like, I got to move. And I kept being put into all these vinyasa flow classes when I learned how to teach something that was a lot more alignment based. So then I did Shiva Ray because I was like, okay, she's very fluid. She moves from a heart space, And so I did that. And then later on, when Jason started offering a 200-hour training, I helped him a little bit with that, and 300-hour trainings and yoga works and all that stuff. So I think part of it has to deal with the trainings that I gravitated toward, but part of it over time, it's also within that and with your interest, it's finding your own voice and your own style. And so I definitely I would be a lot more fluid in many ways than Jason, but I would be like a lot more alignment than Shiva Ray. And then it's also a lot of it's your own. For me, it's like playing on my mat. It's the own transitions. It's the own, like, well, how does this feel in my body? And, and I think a lot of that is just is working with your own body and the bodies that you see, and so I think that for me is what developed it. And then later on, starting like 9 years ago, I became a lot more compassionate toward to especially teachers, but also students as well. But because I was dealing with so many injuries, and that's when I really hurt my hip. Was 9 years ago, and I was so limited. Like I couldn't walk. And I would still have to go to class and try to teach and not act like, but I didn't want to bring in my personal stuff. And I still taught classes and still trying to adjust people. And sometimes it was humorous. You can either laugh or you can cry. Like there were times where I was like, okay, I'm gonna adjust someone's feet. And like literally, I had like a brace on my leg. Like I was like in a lot of pain. And I was down there and I couldn't get up. So I'm teaching a class. Everyone's doing it. And so I kind of just, I made it out like I was supposed to be down there. So I crawled around for like 10 minutes, just adjusting people's feet while I was thinking, how am I going to stand back up again? And so I had everyone face one wall, and then I crawled over to the other wall where there was a ledge, and I used it to get up. And I was this is like, it was like so bad it was good. It's like, I'm teaching a physical thing, and I can't even get up off the floor right now. So anyway, I became very compassionate toward teachers and people who have injuries and who are dealing with injuries either from yoga or not. And I did find when I kind of put out there an injury, I heard from so many, especially teachers and people about their injuries. And so it made me, and I know a lot of teachers who left yoga, period, stopped teaching, period, because of their injuries. Right. And so that's one of the reasons why I started gravitating toward practicing in a safer way. Yeah. And still having a fluid yoga practice, probably like to the naked eye, not much as to, but when you go to a class, it's the same vibe, but it's just making these little tweaks to hopefully, not get like as injured.
That's one of the things that I really love about you, your humor. And it was the first time that I had been into a yoga class where the teacher is goofy or makes jokes or, where I'm used to being in a class where everything is very, like our face is like this, our mind is like this. And we were cracking up in your class the whole time. And that was like, wow, it's the first time that I felt like I had the freedom to be me. Like I could do that too.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think, I kind of like what yours of one, I'm glad you experienced that. But I think one of the things is I remember taking classes and it was very much that separation, like I am the teacher and you are my disciples or whatever it is, like you're over here and and I remember this one teacher, it was so fantastic. I loved it. It was like so bad. It was good. He's like someone came up near the stage. He's like, get off my throne. And I was like, yes. Just like, it's so like extravagant. And now it's like, we're all humans here, And so, so I just realized when I would see that, I was like, no matter where I'm at, my teacher grew up, I just want to be like, we're human. And I'm just taking what I know, which is so much more to know. The more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And I'm just going to squish it out on you, or what I know, and hopefully it's helpful. And there are things like that that I don't know. And that's why I think I love being friends so much with not just teachers or students, because I'm like, well, what do you do? What do you know? Because I don't know that, And so I think it's just seeing that we all have things that we can share and learn from and just be real and not have to be like some certain not just stoic, but to be something else besides who you are. And I think that's what, and even as a teacher, it's like, well, from your style of teaching to how you show up and I think when people are just real, then that's what people relate to also. It's like, we're human.
Yeah. That is really part of this, our podcast, My Inner Teacher, is about, this awareness that all of us have the potential to find. that the voice inside is the authority that you ultimately are put in a situation to make a priority. And injury or some kind of limitation is usually the situation that forces people into that decision. And it sounds like that's, your hip was one of those opportunities, let's call it, not something that happened to you, but for you to change the way you listen to yourself, maybe, but also in your teaching role, that you have more empathy and compassion that expands your curriculum, let's call it, what you teach. Is that accurate?
Yeah, no, it's definitely accurate. And I think one of the things that 9 years ago, when I did have that injury, and that one like really knocked me out, was at first, before that, there's this, you think your path is going to be like this thing. You're like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to go over here. And then this is what I'm going to create. And then when you're like, well, now you can't even move. And you're like, oh, crap. Like, I was fearful of my yoga career. Like, how am I going to eat? Am I going to be like homeless now? And like, what am I going to do? And this is what I thought I was going to build. And then like, you're like, this is what I was known for, like all these crazy things. And like, that's just, it's like the rug's taken out, right? You're like, okay. And so it really put me in a funk, one, because I was in physical pain. Plus there's like the unknown. Well, now what do I do? And so I think with that situation, and I think I'm not the only teacher that's felt that, it's a reframing of the mind. It's like, well, instead of focusing on what I could do, I need to focus on what I can do and list out, what can I do now? Okay, in yoga, I can do these 10 poses. Great. I'm going to focus on that. What are the other things I want to do in life? Or there are all these things. Okay, well, instead of focusing on what was, I need to focus on what is and what it is that I want to create that lines up with this new thing. And I think for a lot of, going back to how this like affects your practice and you show up, I feel like with a lot of people, no matter what discipline it is or what they do, they kind of give up because something happened to them. And instead of, they look at what was rather than what is and what can be. And so I think that's one of the things that also kind of like drew me to be like more compassionate toward teachers, and drew me also to people who have both. I've had a wide range of motion, but I've also had very limited range of motion. So it's kind of working with different people, no matter, it's like, no, you can still practice yoga. We're going to let's do this. Well, I have back issues. Okay, well, let's find how this is going to be for your body. Oh, okay. Yeah, you're not out of the game. You were just like making little tweaks here. So I think even though it was, no pun intended, a pain in the ass, and it still is at times, it's like taking something and not allowing that. It's like making your setbacks divine setups. It's taking something that's taking you behind, or you feel like it's a setback. It's like, okay, well, how can I use this in a beneficial way? How can I just accept what is while I'm trying to get better? And how can I help? How can I use that? In a better way.
Yeah, that is the kind of journey that we're all on. Like it's about the psychological and the physical components of whatever situation you find yourself in. And usually in many spiritual traditions, it's the dark night of the souls that really generates creativity. And it sounds like for your journey, that was one of those moments that you'll never forget. And it's informed you to move in the direction that you're moving.
Right.
I really had a lot of empathy for you when you were talking about being stuck on the floor, because I don't know if you know much about my story, but I broke my back teaching yoga.
Oh, no. Wow.
Do you want to hear the story?
I would love to hear the story. What were you doing, or how was that? Yeah.
So it was in the Iyengar days, like kind of a focus on, let's call it, imposed muscular effort, and we had just opened our yoga studio, and I had a business partner, a woman that was a fellow Iyengar teacher, and we lived in little old San Luis Obispo, and we were really the only two yoga teachers in town. And we said, hey, let's start a studio. So we start this studio, and it just is successful beyond our dreams. Crowded classes, we're making money. We were a monopoly in little San Luis Obispo, but people were curious. And I had just kind of returned from India, living in India for a year at the Iyengar Institute in Pune. And so things were going, but we needed a break. So we decided to close between Christmas and New Year's. But all our students complained. So we said, okay, we're going to do one special class, one evening class midweek. And, you guys, and the reason they were complaining is because all the out-of-town relatives and stuff like that were looking for things to do, and they wanted to take them to a yoga class at this yoga center in San Luis Obispo. And when we closed, it was like, shit, what are we going to do with all our relatives, and friends?
Yeah.
So anyway, this class, our studio could hold maybe 30 mats. 60 people show up for this class.
Oh, my goodness.
So we're kind of freaking out, like, where are we going to put all these people? And Lynn, my partner, she said, listen, why don't we just take turns teaching? One person teach and the other person assist, and then halfway through we'll switch. So Lynn takes the first thing. She's a traditional Iyengar teacher. And she does Virasana, like most Iyengar classes used to start with Virasana that day. The second pose is handstand at the wall. And
wow.
I'm thinking, where did you get that sequencing from? But I'm rolling with it, And so everyone goes to the wall, and half of the room, we don't know who these people are. And I'm off in a corner, just scanning as she's leading people to kick up. 60% of the people kick up, and I'm looking across the room, and here's this large man, athlete, strong, probably 220, 230, 6'3" or 4. And he got up, but one leg is going this way, the other leg's going that way, and his elbows are slightly bent. And I'm thinking, that's not sustainable. And I'm just as I thought that was happening, his arms start to shake, which is the start of the collapse, the fatigue. And as soon as I saw that, I'm literally running corner to corner across the open floor in the middle of the room. And just as he's collapsing, I lunge forward, grab his hips, and take him to the side so he doesn't break his neck. And we hit the floor, and I heard a bone break. And because I had so much adrenaline in my system, I didn't realize it was me. I thought it was him. So I jump up, and I say, are you okay? And his girlfriend's right next to him, freaking out because she heard the bone break too. And he's embarrassed, he's disoriented, he's probably in a little bit of shock what just happened. But eventually he says, I'm fine, I remember thinking, oh, God, we dodged a bullet there. And so the class resumes, and I'm still no pain. And we had a little Iyengar stage, like at the Pune, and I don't know if you've been to Pune before, that there's a little 2-foot high stage at the back of our room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so the teacher puts the class into triangle pose, which is more beginner appropriate, let's call it. And I just lean into this woman to give her a typical Iyengar adjustment in triangle pose, and my back freezes. And the pain is like the indescribable pain. And then I realized that noise was me. And the only thing I could do, I couldn't straighten upright. It hurt to breathe, but the stage was right behind me. So I kind of shimmied back to the stage, and I somehow was able to sit on the edge of that stage. And when it was my turn to teach, I was just like you, like, I'm just trying here. I'm just sitting here, looking, making sure everyone's safe, And when it was my turn to teach, Lynn looks at me, and I go like this, I can't teach. She somehow figured out that I couldn't teach. And then she finished the class, and I sat for an hour, probably an hour, in excruciating pain, just because the show must go on, as you probably are aware. And literally from that moment on, I went through the same kind of psychological, already my mind was so busy. What's happening to I was modeling for Yoga Journal, teaching for Yoga Journal, doing all the things that you're supposed to do with a growing yoga career. And all that evaporated in that moment, that reality. And that night was one of the longest nights I've had in my life.
Oh.
Home. I didn't realize how bad it was until the next day when I started calling doctors and things like that. I didn't go to the hospital. But yeah, that event, though, informed everything moving forward to where I am in this moment. And I couldn't go back to what I had learned. I had to understand what I was capable, just like what you said, what are we capable of doing in the situation that we're in?
Yeah.
And how do we grow from that moment? And for me, it was like learning how to breathe, which was never a big part of Iyengar yoga. It's like first learn asana, and then it poses. For those of you that don't know that Sanskrit word, first learn the poses, and then we'll teach you pranayama, which is the breathing exercises. But man, that didn't work for me in those moments. I had to learn how to breathe. And what I did learn was on the inhale, the contraction of the diaphragm on the inhale was the diaphragm attaches to where the back was broken. That caused intense pain. But every exhale, I was almost completely free of pain as the diaphragm relaxed and took the pressure off the nerve. So I've just figured intuitively, well, let's keep the inhale short and just maximize the exhale. And what I found from that was as I changed the proportion, I would inhale short, but enough oxygen to sustain my biology, but extending the exhale for as long as I could. And over weeks and even months, it would be like a 2 or 3 second inhale. And at the peak, it was a 30-second exhale.
Wow.
And so that percentage of time that I was not in pain versus inhaling when I was in pain, that extended time of exhalation, I later find out in the research that parasympathetic nervous response of the exhale is what creates dilation in our veins, and all the channels of our body dilate on the exhale. And here I was not knowing any of the science or any guidance from anyone. I just figured out, let's keep breathing this way for as long as I can until movement comes back. And it was within 6 months without surgery that I was able to comfortably sit up, comfortably sleep in a bed, comfortably walk. But in terms of a yoga practice, I was limited to mostly prop supported yoga. And it took me almost a year before I started doing forward bends.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So that was this kind of dark night of the soul for my journey. And, I'm curious to see now. So here you are now in this present moment. What is it that you draw your inspiration from for teaching? Like, do you still have a yoga teacher that you study with, or have you created something that you call your own?
I think, I don't, I think it'd be great to study with other teachers. That would be great. And I still, actually, even after being, I'm to thank you for sharing your backstory. I really appreciate that. While being injured and both before and after surgery, I would, go and I would sit in training. So even if I physically didn't do it, I'm like, well, I'm just like, I'm hanging here. I'm like, well, what are they teaching? Or what is this? And da, 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 da. And so I think, right now, my inspiration for teaching, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. My inspiration for teaching is I think one of it depends on, a lot of different things. One, when it comes to teacher trainings, I want teachers to be safe with their own bodies and other people's bodies. That inspires me. It also inspires me if someone is a teacher and I'm inspired by them finding like their voice and their path and be like, okay, let's clarify that and their purpose and supporting that path for them. Because I know as a teacher, that was really hard for me. Like, you're like, hello, can I get some guidance here? And so it's like, I'm very compassionate, like toward that. And then when it comes to like teaching in regular, like public classes, then I try to weave in some of those things. I like teacher trainings because I can get very deep into things. in my public classes, it also depends on what is going on. So sometimes I feel like there needs to be, and I'm not teaching any public classes now. I hop and I make little cameos in there. But so it depends on what I'm, the atmosphere, what's going on in that room. And sometimes, like right now, I'm really just enjoying going in and teaching a class and not being in the head, and just making it more like moving from a heart space instead of a head space, and it almost being like this. I think it's because I'm working a lot on sequencing right now, and it's like, oh, it's this beginning, it's the middle, the end. How do these things, flow together, and and how are we creating like an experience? And so I think it, like a lot of these, like my teaching, even though I might be teaching the same postures, how I'm teaching, sometimes what I'm teaching depends on the students, but it also depends on, and I think post-pandemic, sometimes people, they're like, I'm already in my head, I don't want to be in my head, and I'm like, okay, well, let's do this, So I think that's where, like, right now, a lot of my my teaching's influenced by that. What I'm interested in, which is alignment and injury management, injury prevention. I do those workshops, teacher trainings, but also, in class, I might incorporate some of that, but I'm also in this phase right now. I'm also interested in like not being in the head, just moving from a heart space.
Great.
And I think what influences my teaching right now too is, I'm working on a book, and I'm taking things from that book, and I'm like, okay, let's kind of weave this in here. And so it's kind of inspired, so I'll get inspired by that too. Like, how I'm writing about this, but how does this actually flow with this,
Right on. So ideas are coming to you, miscellaneous places, coming from sometimes random, but sometimes coincidental places. Maybe
Right.
even this interview is an opportunity where through dialogue, I'm learning from you, you're learning from me, Crystal. There's this opportunity to source an intelligence from somewhere. And what I relate to it is the intuition. And where do we find intuition in our, like, practically speaking, how do we find intuition? Do you have any ideas about how you source that intuition? Is there conditions that you have noticed about when insight comes to you, and can you recreate that at will? Have you thought about that ever?
I think I know in my own life, be it teaching wise or not, I think one is intuition. I think, first of all, I think there's, you get like a gut feeling, you get something in your spirit, it was kind of like in my spirit. I felt like, oh, I need to stay in San Francisco. I'm not going to get back on that plane. It's not necessarily logic. That's more like in my spirit. And so I think, and I learned early on, like when I was like 18, 19, that I was too influenced by other people's opinions, that I didn't follow what was in my heart or my intuition. And I like slapped my hand mentally, like for probably 5 years, that I listened to other people's opinions rather than myself. And so I try to be even more tuned with that, and the decisions I make, the conversations I have, what I do, I don't do. And even in yoga, like it is, I think some of it is intuition, or you might have something, but some of it is more intuitive, like, okay, what's going on in the world right now? What's happening? Like, even at the beginning of the pandemic, I was like, okay, we probably need to do a practice where things feel grounded. Like, there's a lot of chaos going on. We don't even know what's going on right now. So it was like, oh, we need something that's grounding. Even though it's the same show, similar show, overall, it's going to have like a very grounding feel. Whereas when people, let's say in the pandemic, where they're in their little boxes at home and they've been in their pen for a long time, then I'm like, there's probably a lot of restless energy. So, okay, now let's actually start moving and try to get that out. So I think it's the same thing now. It's a little bit more, not difficult, but when I go in and I sub, because I'm not seeing the same people, but it's almost like picking up on a vibe. It's a vibe. It's like a it's a vibration, and also just watching people. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this, and I kind of have what I think we're going to do today, but which also it's not set. It can be, it's got some movement, no pun intended, to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. Crystal, anything
I'm
you want to
just
add to this conversation?
sitting here observing two amazing yoga teachers go back and forth as I learn too much, learn so much, not too much, learn so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think really we've gone through everything. I guess I would ask you, is there a piece of tradition that you still keep in the midst of all the creation?
Yes. Yes. So I do there I think there's a piece of like tradition when it comes to the framework, like the overall, like there's like, I'm going to call it the sequencing arc. A lot of classes that you're going to have this arc, the beginning, you got your little trailer, the warm up, not all classes have a warm up, but like that to you're building up and it's coming down no matter what, generally speaking, not always, but no matter what flavor of yoga that you're doing. And so I definitely keep the framework, and I think I do keep a lot of the traditional postures, but then some of those postures, they are, they're just little tweaks. And then, so there is a lot of that. And I feel like when a lot of people that come to my class, which is very interesting because I made modifications, I do certain things, they actually like, oh, Laura, your class feels a little more straightforward and traditional at times, even though maybe that's post-pandemic, if that makes sense. So I'm not adding Pilates in there or, jumping jacks or whatever. Like, it's like we're working with these certain postures and stuff like that. So not to say it's like some classes it's like yoga for weights, which is great because you need both strength and flexibility, but it's more some of like the I think I still use a lot of the traditional postures and the similar arc, but then I also weave in other things that sometimes it's not maybe necessarily a set sequence. The sequence is based on what postures are coming up. And sometimes even the postures that are coming up, there might be something that doesn't look like a traditional yoga posture in order to prepare for a posture that's coming up.
Yeah, great. It's been lovely talking to you, and I really admire the journeys and the way that you've navigated. I mean, when you think about it, navigating the pandemic has not been easy on the yoga industry, and the fact that you still believe in yoga, that it's part of you, it's never going to leave you, and we adapt, we create opportunities as we are in the moment, which I applaud you. That's not an easy path to take.
Well, thank you. Yes.
I just have one last question. And you kind of already answered it before when you said that you were listening to all the voices, but how did you get yourself to stop listening? What was that? What happened in that moment that you stopped listening to the other voices and started listening to your own?
Yeah. Well, two things. A long time ago, when I stopped listening to the voice and listened to my own, that's when like things actually happened. That's when I'm like, oh, I'm going to go hop on a plane to Africa right now. I was in college. I'm like, I'm going to do that. Like, listen, I feel like I'm going to go to New York City. If I would have told people, oh, I'm going to move to New York City, I don't have a job and I'm going to apply for this, people are like, well, what are you thinking about? Da, 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 da. And so I think it's listening to that inner voice, because I think we do that, then that's when life happens. And even more recently, I was trying to get a lot of people's opinions about something, and then you get everyone's opinion. It's just like a whole cluster, thing that's going on. And I was recently listening to something about that, about, it's about getting a lot of opinions, but it's more about like, okay, when you get quiet, like, and even more the past couple of days, let me just sit and meditate, not on the issue or the problem, but just sit and meditate. And from that grounded place, from that inner knowing, make a decision from there that feels authentic to me, rather than making a decision about what feels authentic to someone else who's not even in the situation. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it's, yeah. So I think, but I feel like when you do that, it's just being more authentic. And I think that, for yourself, and it's more authentic for the path you want to take. And I think it's better for you and it's better for everyone else.
I think guys, there's so many things that this last question is touching on. Intuition ultimately requires quiet, soft, send energy in the body. And when you do, I did a lot of research in my book on intuition, and certain authors had certain ideas, but there was a consistent thread through all of it. The gut, the heart, and the brain. How do we integrate those things? And the heart and the brain struggle because they have different agendas. So the heart wants to bond and the mind wants to conquer, like and that's a really, philosophically, that's a hard thing to resolve. So the gut in certain cultures is the foundation for intuition. And even in English, we have this expression, I feel it in my gut. I have a gut feeling. Well, why? Where did that originate from? So I think the ancient yogis figured this out, and they understood how to create stillness in the body, mentally, physically, emotionally. And in that state, the yogis believed that this divine intelligence has space to enter. It's like you can't fill a cup until you empty it, so to speak. And you've just described that for your process perfectly. Like there's this gut feeling, there's this space around the heart, and then it's listening, and which is up a little bit higher. And that's been my experience as well. And that's really my hope for this podcast, is to bring people here of all walks, to not just for yoga people, but for athletes and others, dancers, etc., anyone involved in the movement industry, here on the show to talk about this step into the unknown, this step into the voice that's speaking to you and that authority that comes with that voice. So thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing too. Absolutely. Yeah. Listen to the inner voice. And just as you were saying, I totally agree. It's taking time to be quiet.
Yeah.
And kind of get away from the distractions so you can actually hear the voice.
Exactly.
Yes. And I do find that sometimes, I think even sometimes the things when your mind isn't on, like the things that sometimes wake you up.
Right.
It's like, oh, this is like, it's like you wake, like, oh, it's a gut, thing too. It's like, oh, well, maybe maybe I need to do something about that. Yeah.
And not maybe.
I should. I need to. Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Peter. And thank you, Crystal. I appreciate you inviting me to be on your podcast.
Yes, facilitation. That's what I'm here for. Thank you.
You're here for more than that, Crystal. That's it for this episode. Be well and stay open to the teacher within. If you've enjoyed our time together, follow or subscribe and stay tuned for upcoming chats you don't want to miss.